I woke to the sound that every parent dreads. My phone vibrating against the wooden nightstand with that particular insistence that means emergency, that means something has gone terribly wrong. The screen glowed in the darkness of my bedroom, showing a time that made my stomach drop. 3:17 in the morning. And beneath that, a name that made my heart stop entirely. My daughter. I fumbled for the phone, my hands already shaking before I even answered. The rationale part of my brain was cataloging possibilities, each one worse than the last: accident, hospital, assault. The irrational part, the part that was purely mother, was already screaming. Hello, sweetheart. What's wrong? My voice came out hoarse, strangled by fear. Mom. The word was a sob, a broken thing that barely resembled my daughter's voice. Mom, I need help. I need money, right now. I sat up, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. What happened? Are you hurt? Where are you? I'm okay. I'm not hurt, but Mom, I'm in so much trouble. The words tumbled out in a rush, panic making them run together. I need $47,000. I need it by morning, or I'm going to lose everything: my apartment, my job, everything. Please, Mom, please. If you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please hit that subscribe button now. And to get the conversation going, please leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Thank you so much. Now let's get back to the story: $47,000. The number hung in the air between us, impossible and terrifying. I had spent 24 years raising this child, 24 years of scraped knees and homework help and teaching her to drive, 24 years of believing I knew her, understood her, could protect her, and now she was calling me at 3 in the morning, asking for an amount of money that represented nearly everything I had saved for my retirement. Sweetheart, slow down. Tell me what happened. Why do you need so much money? What kind of trouble are you in? I was trying to stay calm, trying to be the parent she needed, but my voice was shaken. I can't explain right now. There's no time. I just need you to trust me. Please, Mom. I've never asked you for anything like this. I wouldn't if it wasn't life or death. She was crying now, really crying. I know it's a lot. I know it's everything, but I swear I'll pay you back. I swear. Life or death. Those words did something to my brain, flipped some switch that turned off rational thought and turned on pure maternal instinct. My baby was in trouble. My baby needed me. Nothing else mattered. Okay, I heard myself say. Okay, honey, how do I get you the money? The banks aren't open. I can't withdraw that much cash until morning. Wire transfer, there's an app. I'll text you the instructions. Please hurry, Mom, please. I have until 6 o'clock or everything falls apart. I'll do it right now. Stay on the phone with me. I can't. I have to go, but I'll call you back as soon as it's done. I love you, Mom. Thank you. Thank you so much. The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness, staring at my phone, my heart still racing. Something felt wrong. Something felt very wrong. But she was my daughter. She was in trouble. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't help her? The text came through a moment later, instructions for downloading an app I'd never heard of, creating an account, linking my bank information. My hands were still shaking as I followed the steps. The app looked legitimate, professional. There were security questions, there was a verification process. It all seemed real. I navigated to my savings account, the one I'd been building for 15 years, $47,312. Nearly everything I had, my safety net, my future. But what was money compared to my child's safety? My finger hovered over the confirm button. That wrongness was still there, a sick feeling in my stomach that I couldn't name. I thought about calling her back, asking more questions, but she'd said 6 o'clock. She'd said life or death. She'd said no time. I pressed confirm. The screen showed a processing message, then a confirmation. Transaction complete. $47,000 sent to an account number I didn't recognize, for a daughter who'd hung up on me. I tried calling her back. The phone rang and went to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. I sent a text. Honey, it's done. Call me back. I need to know you're okay. No response. I sat in my bed, in the darkness, and waited. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind a cold, creeping dread. I looked at the transaction confirmation again, read the account number, read the name of the receiving bank. Nothing about it said my daughter's name. Nothing about it looked familiar. At 3:45, I called her again. Voicemail. At 4 o'clock, I called again. Still nothing. At 4:30, I got up and made coffee because I knew I wouldn't be sleeping again. My hands had stopped shaking, but that was worse somehow. The stillness felt like the quiet before something terrible. I kept checking my phone. No calls, no texts, just that confirmation screen showing me that I'd sent nearly every dollar I had to an account I didn't know. At 5:15, my phone rang, but it wasn't my daughter's number. It was one I didn't recognize, a local area code. Hello? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, distant. Is this Mrs. Patterson? A woman's voice, professional and carefully neutral. Yes, who is this? This is Officer Williams with the Metro Police Department. I'm calling about your daughter. Is she with you right now? The world tilted. No. She called me a few hours ago. She was in trouble. She needed money. I sent it to her. Why are you calling? Is she hurt? Is she in the hospital? There was a pause that lasted too long. Ma'am, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your daughter has been with us since 11 o'clock last night. She was brought in as a witness to an incident at her workplace. She's been here the entire time. She hasn't made any phone calls except one to her roommate about an hour ago. I couldn't process the words. They didn't make sense. That's not possible. She called me. At 3:17, she said she needed money. She was crying. It was her voice. Ma'am, have you sent money to anyone in the last few hours? The coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. Brown liquid spread across the tiles like blood. $47,000, I whispered. I sent her $47,000. Another pause, longer this time. When the officer spoke again, her voice was gentler, full of a pity that made me want to scream. Ma'am, I'm very sorry, but you've been the victim of what we call a family emergency scam. Someone cloned your daughter's number and voice. What you sent wasn't to your daughter, it was to criminals. I need you to contact your bank immediately, right now. Do you understand? I understood. Oh God, I understood. The wrongness I'd felt, the sick feeling in my stomach. My instincts had been screaming at me and I'd ignored them. I'd let fear and love make me stupid. I'd given away everything I had to strangers who'd played me like an instrument. Your daughter is safe, Officer Williams was saying. She's right here. She wants to talk to you. Mom? It was her voice, really her voice. Not panicked, not crying, concerned and confused. Mom, what's going on? The police said someone pretended to be me. I couldn't speak. I was too busy calculating the dimensions of my disaster. $47,000, my entire retirement savings, gone, sent to criminals who probably had it divided and hidden in a dozen different accounts by now. Untraceable, unrecoverable, forever lost. Mom, are you there? My daughter's voice was getting more worried. Talk to me, what happened? They took everything, I finally managed. They sounded just like you. They knew your name. They knew how to scare me. And I gave them everything. I heard her inhale sharply. Oh my God. Mom, how much? $47,000. The line went silent. In that silence, I heard my daughter's future rearranging itself. My future, our future. I'd been planning to help her with a down payment on a house. I'd been planning to fund part of her wedding when she was ready. I'd been planning to have something to leave her when I died. All of that gone. All of it sent to criminals because I'd been too scared to ask the right questions. I'm coming home, she said. Right now. The police are going to give me a ride. Mom, I'm so sorry. This is because of me. They used me to hurt you. It's not your fault. The words felt automatic, empty. Of course it wasn't her fault. But it was someone's fault. Someone had done this. Deliberately, carefully. Someone had studied me, studied my daughter, studied our relationship well enough to know exactly which buttons to push. Someone had turned my love for my child into a weapon against me. Officer Williams came back on the line. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to have your daughter give you the number for our fraud division. They'll walk you through reporting this to your bank and filing a report with us. I have to be honest with you. The recovery rate for these types of scams is very low. Once the money is transferred, especially through these apps, it's usually gone, but we have to try. Of course, the recovery rate was low. These weren't amateurs. They'd probably done this to dozens of mothers, hundreds. They'd probably made millions by exploiting the fact that parents will do anything for their children. That fear makes us stupid. That love makes us vulnerable. I called my bank as soon as we hung up. I explained what had happened to 3 different people before I finally got to someone who could help. They put a hold on my account. They started an investigation. They use words like unfortunately and typically and in most cases that all meant the same thing. I wasn't getting my money back. By the time my daughter arrived home at 6:30, I'd been on the phone with the bank, the police, and the fraud division of the app company for nearly 2 hours. I'd filled out forms, I'd provided transaction details, I'd done everything they asked, and I'd watched the sun rise on a day that looked exactly like yesterday but wasn't. Yesterday I'd had security, yesterday I'd had a future. Today I had nothing but the slowly crystallizing understanding of how completely I'd been destroyed. She came through the door pale and shaken, still in her work uniform from the restaurant where she waited tables to put herself through nursing school. The police had kept her half the night to get her statement about a robbery that had happened in the parking lot. She'd been inside during the actual incident, but they'd wanted to question everyone. She'd been tired and stressed and completely unaware that miles away someone was using her voice to steal everything from her mother. Mom, she dropped her bag and came to me, wrapped her arms around me. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so, so sorry. I held her and I didn't cry because I couldn't. The tears were locked somewhere inside me, frozen by shock and the slow burn of understanding. You didn't do anything wrong. They used my voice. How did they get my voice? How did they know what to say? That was the question that was going to haunt me. How did they know? How did they have a recording of her voice that was good enough to fool her own mother? How did they know about our relationship? Know that I would do anything for her, know exactly how to manipulate me. The fraud investigator at the bank called back at 8. His voice had that same careful neutrality as the police officers. Mrs. Patterson, I've completed the initial investigation. I'm very sorry, but the transfer was authorized by you, using your security credentials from your device. While we understand this was done under false pretenses, the transaction itself was legitimate from our perspective. We have no grounds to reverse it. So I just lose everything? $47,000, and you can't do anything? We filed reports with the relevant authorities. If the money can be traced and recovered, you'll be among the first to know. But I have to be honest with you. These operations are usually international. The money is typically moved through multiple accounts within hours. The likelihood of recovery is minimal. Minimal, not impossible, but minimal, which meant I should start getting used to the idea that my savings were gone, that my retirement was gone, that my security was gone. I hung up and looked at my daughter, sitting on the couch with her face in her hands. I'm going to get a second job, she said. I'll pay you back. I'll pay back every penny. No. My voice came out harder than I intended. This isn't your debt. You didn't do anything. This was done to both of us. But they used me. They used my voice, my name. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have sent the money. She was right, but she was also wrong. If it hadn't been her, it would have been something else. These people were professionals. They found vulnerabilities, and they exploited them. My vulnerability was my love for my daughter. If I hadn't had a daughter, they would have found something else. An elderly parent, a sick relative, a friend in trouble. They would have found a way. Over the next few days, I learned more about family emergency scams than I ever wanted to know. I learned that they were increasingly common. I learned that the scammers used artificial intelligence to clone voices from social media videos, phone calls, any recording they could find. I learned that they researched their victims carefully, building profiles from Facebook posts and Instagram stories and public records. They knew who was vulnerable. They knew who had money. They knew exactly when and how to strike. I learned that I wasn't alone. There were hundreds of victims, maybe thousands. People who'd sent their savings to strangers who pretended to be their children, their grandchildren, their siblings. people who'd been manipulated by fear and love into making decisions they couldn't unmake, people whose lives had been casually destroyed by criminals who probably never thought about us again once they had our money. I also learned that shame was part of their weapon. Most victims didn't report the crime because they were too embarrassed, too ashamed of being fooled, too afraid of being judged for being stupid enough to fall for such an obvious scam. Because once you knew the trick, it seemed obvious. Of course, it was a scam. Of course, no one really needs $47,000 by 6 in the morning. Of course, you should have asked more questions, demanded proof, waited for the bank to open. But fear doesn't wait for mornings. Fear doesn't ask for proof. Fear hears your child crying, and it acts. My daughter moved back home. She didn't ask, just showed up with boxes and announced that she was canceling her lease. "You're not living alone while you're dealing with this," she said, "and I'm not paying rent while you're struggling. We'll figure this out together." I wanted to argue. I wanted to maintain the fiction that I was fine, that I was handling it, that my entire sense of security hadn't been shattered in the space of a 15-minute phone call. But I didn't have the energy. I let her move into her old room. I let her make dinner while I sat at the kitchen table staring at my laptop screen, looking at my decimated bank account, trying to figure out how to rebuild a future from nothing. The police detective assigned to my case called a week after the incident. "Mrs. Patterson, I wanted to update you on where we are. We've tracked the initial account where your money was sent. It was opened 3 days before the scam using stolen identity credentials. The account was emptied within an hour of your transfer, with the money being moved to 4 separate accounts in 3 different countries. From there, we lose the trail. So it's gone." Not a question, I already knew. "I'm sorry, these operations are sophisticated. They use layers of transfers to make the money untraceable, and they move fast. By the time you reported the fraud, the money had already been converted to cryptocurrency and moved offshore." "Who are they? Who does this?" "We believe it's part of an organized operation, possibly based overseas. They use call centers, scripts, voice cloning software. It's a business for them, a very profitable one." A business. They destroyed my life, and for them it was just another day at the office. Just another sucker who'd sent them their retirement savings. They probably had quotas. They probably had bonuses for particularly successful scams. They probably never thought about the fact that on the other end of their carefully crafted lie was a real person whose future they were destroying. "What happens now?" I asked. "We keep the case open. If we get new information, we follow up. If international authorities manage to shut down part of the operation, we might be able to trace some victims. But I'm going to be honest with you, Mrs. Patterson. Most of these cases don't have happy endings. I'm sorry." I thanked him and hung up. My daughter was watching me from the doorway, her face full of guilt and helplessness. "Mom, I need to get a job." The words came out flat, matter of fact. "I was going to retire in 3 years. Now I need to work until I'm 70 at least. Maybe longer. I need to figure out what kind of work I can do." I'd been a teacher for 28 years. I'd retired early at 55 with a modest pension and the savings I had carefully built over decades. The pension covered my basic expenses. The savings were supposed to cover emergencies, travel, helping my daughter when she needed it, making my last years comfortable instead of just survivable. Now I needed to go back to work at 57 in a job market that didn't value women my age, with a gap in my resume that would require explanation. I would have to tell prospective employers that I'd retired but couldn't afford to stay retired because I'd been the victim of a scam. I would have to expose my vulnerability and stupidity to strangers who would judge me for it. "I'm dropping out of nursing school," my daughter announced. "I'm going to work full time. We'll pool our money." "Absolutely not." This at least I could be firm about. "You're 2 years from finishing. You're not throwing that away." "Mom, you paid for my first 2 years. You can't afford the last two now, and I can't let you go into debt for me." "You have loans. You'll finish on loans like everyone else." "Those loans were supposed to be small. Now they'll be massive. It'll take me decades to pay them off." "Better decades of loan payments than a lifetime of regret for not finishing what you started." I looked at her, really looked at her, 24 years old, beautiful and smart and full of potential. A future that should have been bright, now clouded by the fact that someone had used her voice to destroy her mother. This is not your burden to carry. How is it not? They used me. They used my voice, my relationship with you. If I hadn't existed, this wouldn't have happened. If you hadn't existed, my life would be empty. You are not the problem. The people who did this are the problem. But even as I said it, I felt the lie in it. Because while she wasn't the problem, she was the vector. She was the weapon they'd used against me. And some small, terrible part of me that I hated was angry at her for existing, for being the thing I loved enough to make me vulnerable. I saw that knowledge in her eyes. She knew. She knew that somewhere in my heart, beneath the love and the rational understanding that none of this was her fault, there was resentment. There was anger. There was the poisonous thought that if I'd just been alone, if I'd just had nothing to lose, I would still have my savings. That was part of their crime, I realized. They hadn't just stolen money, they'd stolen the purity of my relationship with my daughter. They'd planted doubt and guilt and resentment where before there had been only love. They'd turned the best thing in my life into a complicated, painful thing, and they'd done it without even trying, just as collateral damage in their pursuit of profit. The weeks turned into months. I got a job as a substitute teacher, which paid poorly, but at least was something I could do. My daughter kept going to nursing school, but she added a second job on weekends, waiting tables at a different restaurant. We lived in my small house, splitting expenses, eating cheap meals, going nowhere, doing nothing, surviving, barely. I watched my friends go on vacations I couldn't afford. I watched them talk about retirement plans I no longer had. I made excuses for why I couldn't go out to dinner, couldn't take trips, couldn't do any of the things I'd spent decades saving to be able to do. And I felt the shame of it, the embarrassment, the sense that I'd failed at the most basic task of adult life, which was protecting my own assets. The worst part was that I couldn't stop replaying that phone call. 3:17 in the morning. Mom, I need help. The crying, the panic, the fear in her voice, or what I'd thought was her voice. I ran through it again and again, looking for the moment where I should have known, the moment where I should have stopped and questioned and protected myself. But there was no such moment, or rather, every moment was that moment. I could have hung up and called her back on a different line. I could have asked questions they couldn't have prepared for. I could have waited until morning. I could have done a dozen things differently, but I hadn't, because in that moment, all I'd been able to think was that my child needed me. That was the trap. That was the perfect, beautiful trap that had no escape. They'd made me choose between being a good mother and being a smart adult. And I'd chosen wrong. Or I'd chosen right, depending on how you looked at it. I'd chosen love over logic, and it had destroyed me. 6 months after the scam, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I'd become paranoid about phone calls, especially from unknown numbers. But something made me pick up. Is this Mrs. Patterson? A man's voice, young, nervous. Yes, who is this? My name is David Chen. I'm a journalist working on a story about family emergency scams. I was given your name by the police department. I understand you were a victim of one of these scams, and I was hoping you might be willing to talk to me about your experience. My first instinct was to hang up. The last thing I wanted was to have my stupidity documented for public consumption. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the fact that I was tired of carrying the shame alone. Maybe it was the fact that I wanted someone to care about what had happened to me. Maybe it was just that I needed to tell the story to someone who wasn't my daughter, someone who didn't carry their own guilt about it. What kind of story? I asked. An investigative piece on the scam operations targeting elderly parents, how they work, who's behind them, what's being done to stop them. And I want to include voices from victims, real stories from real people who've had their lives destroyed by these criminals. Elderly parents. I was 57. I wasn't elderly, but to this young journalist, I probably seemed ancient. And maybe I was. Maybe getting fooled by a voice clone made me officially old. Why should I talk to you? The question came out harsher than I intended. What good does it do me to have everyone know how stupid I was? You weren't stupid. His voice was firm. That's actually the point of the article. These scams work on intelligent, careful people because they exploit the one thing that makes us human, which is our love for the people we care about. The criminals are sophisticated. They're using technology that didn't exist 5 years ago, and they're targeting normal people who have no defense against it. I lost everything, I said. $47,000, my entire retirement, and I didn't get a penny back. I know, and I'm sorry, but that's exactly the kind of story people need to hear. Not because you were stupid, but because you were human, and because what happened to you could happen to anyone. I thought about it. I thought about my friends who didn't know the whole story. I thought about the other victims out there carrying their shame in silence. I thought about my daughter living with guilt that wasn't hers to carry. And I thought about the criminals operating with impunity because no one wanted to admit they'd been fooled. Okay, I said, I'll talk to you. We met for coffee the next day. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with an earnest face and a notebook that he used instead of a phone to record our conversation. He listened to my story without interrupting, asking questions only to clarify details. When I got to the part where I'd pressed the confirm button, sending away my entire savings, he looked genuinely pained. That moment, he said, when you knew something was wrong but you did it anyway. That's the part that gets me. Because you were right. Your instincts were telling you it was a scam, but your love for your daughter was louder than your instincts. My love made me stupid, I said. No, your love made you human, and they exploited that. He paused. Can I tell you something? I've been researching these operations for 6 months. I've interviewed dozens of victims, and every single one of them had that moment where they knew something was off, but they did it anyway because the person they loved needed them. That's not stupidity. That's the way humans are wired, and these criminals have figured out how to weaponize it. So what's the solution? Never help anyone? Assume every cry for help is a lie? No, the solution is awareness. It's teaching people about these scams before they happen. It's putting pressure on tech companies to develop better verification systems. It's law enforcement taking this seriously instead of treating it as a low-priority crime. And it's stories like yours making people understand that this isn't about stupid people falling for obvious tricks. It's about sophisticated criminals using cutting-edge technology to exploit basic human emotions. The article came out 3 weeks later. It was long, detailed, and devastating. My story was there, along with stories from 6 other victims, a grandmother who'd sent $20,000 to someone pretending to be her grandson, a father who'd wired $15,000 to save his daughter from jail, a sister who'd emptied her account to pay hospital bills for her brother. All of us, manipulated by the same basic technique: fear plus love equals money. The article went viral. Suddenly, my phone was ringing constantly with interview requests, follow-ups, people wanting my perspective. My story was being shared thousands of times on social media. I read the comments, which was a mistake. Some people were sympathetic, many were not. How could anyone be that stupid? This is natural selection at work. If you're dumb enough to send that much money without verifying, you deserve to lose it. The cruelty of strangers was almost worse than the loss of the money, almost. But reading those comments taught me something important. It taught me that the shame I felt, the shame that had been eating at me for months, wasn't really mine. It was something the criminals had planted in me, something they counted on. Because as long as victims were too ashamed to report the crime, too embarrassed to tell their stories, the scammers could keep operating with impunity. The article also did something unexpected. It prompted the police to launch a larger investigation into the scam ring that had targeted me. Apparently, multiple victims had been hit by the same operation, and my willingness to go public had encouraged others to come forward. The detective called me with an update. Mrs. Patterson, I wanted you to know that we've made some progress. Working with international authorities, we've identified what we believe is the call center operation behind your scam. It's based in Eastern Europe, operating out of what looks like a legitimate tech company, but is actually running multiple fraud operations. Can you shut them down? My heart was beating faster. Hope was a dangerous thing, but I couldn't help it. We're working on it. But it's complicated. Different jurisdictions, different laws. Even if we shut down this operation, there are dozens of others. But we are making progress. And your story, going public like that, it's helping. It's putting pressure on the tech companies to take this seriously. The app you used to send the money, they've completely overhauled their security because of the publicity from that article. It was something. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But something. More victims started reaching out to me directly. They had read the article and wanted to share their stories. I found myself becoming an accidental advocate, talking to journalists, doing podcasts, speaking at community centers about how to avoid these scams. It wasn't much, but it was something I could do with the wreckage of my experience. My daughter noticed the change in me. "You seem different," she said one night as we sat together watching television, a rare moment of relaxation. "Not happy, but different. More solid somehow." "I'm angry," I said. "For months, I was just scared and ashamed. But now I'm angry, and anger is more useful than shame." "Are you angry at me?" The question she'd been holding back for months. I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the guilt she was still carrying, the way she'd made herself smaller, quieter, less present in my life because she thought she didn't deserve to take up space. "No," I said, "I'm not angry at you. I was for a little while, and I'm sorry for that. But you didn't do this, they did this, and I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making sure fewer people fall for it." It wasn't closure. There was no closure. I was still working as a substitute teacher. I was still living paycheck to paycheck. I still wouldn't be able to retire until I was ancient. My savings were still gone, disappeared into some criminal's untraceable account. But I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't silent anymore. And I wasn't ashamed anymore. The person who'd called me that night, who'd used my daughter's voice to steal everything I had taken a lot from me. But they hadn't taken everything. They hadn't taken my relationship with my daughter, not permanently. They hadn't taken my ability to speak, and they hadn't taken my ability to fight back. A year after the scam, I was invited to testify before a congressional committee investigating elder fraud. I sat in a room full of lawmakers and told my story again. I told them about the phone call, about the fear, about the moment I'd pressed confirm and sent away my future. I told them about the months of shame and the slow realization that I hadn't done anything wrong. "The criminals who did this to me are still out there," I said. "They're still calling parents and grandparents every single night, using voices they've stolen to steal money. They're still destroying lives. And they're doing it because it works, because our love for our children makes us vulnerable, and because they face almost no consequences." "What would you like to see change?" one of the lawmakers asked. "I want the tech companies to take responsibility for the tools they've created. Voice cloning technology shouldn't be freely available to anyone with an internet connection. I want better verification systems for money transfers. I want international cooperation to prosecute these criminals. And I want education. I want every parent and grandparent in this country to know that this is happening, that these scams exist, and that falling for one doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human." I don't know if anything will change. Congressional hearings don't always lead to action, but at least I was heard. At least I stood up and said that what happened to me mattered, that the people who did this to me should face consequences, that the systems that enabled it need to change. My daughter graduated from nursing school. She walked across that stage and received her degree, and I was there cheering louder than anyone. She got a job at a good hospital. She moved into her own apartment. She started building the life that had been temporarily derailed by the scam that had used her voice as a weapon. We're okay now. Not great. Not where we should be. But okay, I'm still working. She's still paying off larger student loans than she should have had to take. We both still flinch when the phone rings late at night. We both still feel the echoes of that night, the way it changed us and changed our relationship with trust and safety, and the fundamental belief that the world is a place where love is rewarded rather than exploited. But we survived, and we're still here, and that matters. The money is gone. I've accepted that. $47,000 disappeared into the ether, probably spent on luxury goods and more technology to scam more victims. I'll never get it back. I'll work longer than I planned. I'll have less in my old age than I saved for. My life will be smaller than it should have been. But I'm not silent. I'm not invisible. And I'm not alone. There are thousands of us now, victims who've chosen to speak up, to tell our stories, to warn others. We didn't ask to be part of this community. We were drafted into it by criminals who saw us as nothing more than targets. But we've chosen to make something from our pain. I still get phone calls sometimes, unknown numbers. I let them go to voicemail. If it's important, they'll leave a message. If it's my daughter, she'll call back from a number I recognize. I've learned to protect myself, even if I learned too late. But I also haven't stopped being a mother. I haven't stopped loving my daughter. I haven't built walls so high that no cry for help could reach me. Because that would be letting the criminals win in a different way. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to break the bonds between parents and children. They wanted to make us doubt each other, fear each other, see each other as potential threats instead of sources of comfort. I won't give them that. I won't let them turn my love into fear. I've learned to verify. I've learned to ask questions. I've learned to pause before acting. But I haven't learned to stop caring, and I never will. That's what they didn't understand, the people who did this to me. They thought they were just stealing money. They thought we were just marks, just stupid people who deserved to lose their savings. But what they actually did was declare war on the most fundamental human bond, the love between parents and children. And that's a war they can't win. Not ultimately, because there will always be more of us than there are of them. More people who love, more people who would give everything to protect the ones they care about. More people who, when pushed, will stand up and fight back. They can steal our money. They can steal our voices. They can even steal our sense of safety. But they can't steal our humanity. They can't make us stop loving, and they can't make us stop fighting for a world where that love isn't weaponized against us. I'm 58 now. I work as a substitute teacher and an advocate for fraud victims. I live in a small house with my daughter who visits every week. I have $700 in my savings account and a retirement that exists only in theory decades away. I have a story that I've told hundreds of times to anyone who will listen, and I have a mission. No one else should have to answer a phone at 3 in the morning and have their life destroyed in 15 minutes. No one else should have to feel the shame I felt, the guilt my daughter carried, the helpless rage of watching your future disappear into a stranger's account. No one else should have to learn the way I learned that love can be turned into a weapon, and that the people we trust to protect us, the banks and the tech companies and the law enforcement agencies, aren't equipped to handle the sophistication of modern criminals. Things are changing slowly. The article I participated in led to more articles, more investigations, more attention. Some tech companies have restricted access to voice cloning software. Some banks have added verification steps for large transfers. Some police departments have created specialized fraud units. It's not enough, but it's something. And more importantly, more victims are speaking up. More people are sharing their stories without shame. More families are having conversations about how to verify identities, how to create safe words, how to protect themselves from scams that exploit love. The criminals relied on our silence. They relied on our shame. Every person who speaks up, who tells their story, who refuses to be embarrassed by the fact that they loved someone enough to be vulnerable, chips away at that power. I can't get my money back. I can't undo what happened. I can't return to the life I had before that phone call. But I can make sure that what happened to me means something. I can make sure that other parents hear my story and learn from it. I can make sure that lawmakers understand the scope of the problem. I can make sure that the criminals who did this to me, who do this to dozens of families every single day, face a world that's just a little bit harder for them to operate in. My daughter and I talk about that night sometimes now, without the raw pain that made it too dangerous to discuss for so long. We talk about how terrifying it must have been for her to learn that someone had cloned her voice. We talk about how the criminals had probably gotten the recording from one of her social media videos, or from a voicemail she'd left me, or from any of a dozen digital traces we all leave behind without thinking. We talk about how we've both become more careful, more suspicious, less willing to trust that things are what they seem. I hate that they did this to us, she said recently. I hate that they made the world smaller and scarier. I hate that now, when you hear my voice, part of you has to wonder if it's really me. It's not a big part, I told her, and it gets smaller every day. They tried to poison our relationship. They didn't succeed, but they changed it. Yes, they changed it, but maybe not entirely for the worse. I took her hand. I'm more careful now. I ask more questions. I don't just react out of fear, and you're more aware of how your information can be used against you. We're both more thoughtful. That's not a terrible thing to learn, even if we learned it the hard way. She squeezed my hand. I still wish I could pay you back. You are paying me back every day by finishing school, by building a good life, by not letting what they did define your future. That's all the payment I need. It's true, I don't need her money. What I need is for her to thrive. What I need is for her to not carry guilt that isn't hers. What I need is for both of us to move forward into futures that, while different from what we planned, are still full of possibility. The detective calls me occasionally with updates. They've shut down the operation that targeted me, though of course a dozen others have sprung up in its place. They've arrested some lower-level operatives, though the people at the top remain out of reach. They've recovered some money for some victims, though none for me. It's the nature of these crimes. They move too fast, hide too well, operate from too many jurisdictions. But at least someone is trying. I've become friendly with some of the other victims. We have a support group that meets monthly. We share our stories, our coping strategies, our small victories and ongoing struggles. There's a grandmother who lost $20,000, a father who lost $30,000, a sister who lost her entire inheritance, $75,000 that her parents had left for her. All of us, carrying losses we can't afford, trying to rebuild lives that were shattered by strangers who used our love against us. But we're not just a group of victims anymore. We're advocates, we're warriors. We've turned our pain into purpose. We speak at schools and community centers. We testify at hearings. We work with tech companies to improve their security. We refuse to be just cautionary tales. We're fighting back, the only way we can. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, it's making a difference. Fewer people are falling for these scams, not because the scammers have stopped, but because more people are aware. More people know to verify before sending money. More people know about voice cloning and deep fakes and all the tools that criminals use. More people have heard stories like mine and thought, that could be me, I need to be prepared. That's what I tell people when I speak now. It's not about being smarter or more careful. It's not about judging people who fall for these scams. It's about understanding that we're all vulnerable. We all have people we love. We all have fears that can be exploited. And we all need to have plans in place before the crisis happens. Because in the moment of crisis, when you think someone you love is in danger, you won't think clearly. No one does. My daughter and I have a system now. If either of us ever needs money urgently, we have a code word. It's something only we know, something that couldn't be guessed or researched. It's our insurance policy against ever being victimized this way again. And it's something I wish I'd had before. I wish a lot of things had been different. I wish I'd been more suspicious. I wish I'd called her back on a different line. I wish I'd waited until morning. I wish I'd asked the right questions. But wishing doesn't change anything. What changes things is action, speaking up, fighting back, refusing to let the criminals have the last word. So that's what I do. Every day I wake up in my small house. I go to work at a job I didn't plan to have at this age. I come home to bills I can barely pay. And I keep fighting. I keep telling my story. I keep working to make sure that fewer families have to experience what we experienced. I keep pushing for changes in technology, in law enforcement, in public awareness. I keep refusing to be silent. The criminals who did this to me got away with it. They got my money. They probably never think about me, never wonder about the life they destroyed. To them, I was just another mark, another successful operation, Another $47,000 to be laundered and spent. They're probably targeting someone else right now, using someone else's voice, destroying someone else's future. But they didn't win. Not completely. Because I'm still here, I'm still fighting. And every person who hears my story and protects themselves is a victory they don't get. Every system that's changed because of the publicity around cases like mine is a barrier they have to overcome. Every victim who refuses to be silenced is a voice they can't drown out. I lost $47,000 that night when my phone rang at 3:17 in the morning, but I didn't lose everything. I didn't lose my daughter. I didn't lose my voice. I didn't lose my ability to fight back. And I didn't lose my humanity, my capacity to love and trust and hope, even though they tried to take that too. This is my story. This is what happened when I answered the phone at 3 in the morning and heard my daughter crying. This is what it looks like to be victimized by sophisticated criminals who exploit love as a weapon. This is what it feels like to lose everything and have to rebuild from nothing. And this is what it means to refuse to let that loss define you, to turn pain into purpose, to stand up and say that what happened to you matters. I'm not special. There's nothing unique about my story except the details. There are thousands of us, tens of thousands, maybe more, parents and grandparents and siblings and friends, all of us who heard someone we loved in crisis and did what any decent human would do. We helped, and we were destroyed for it. But we're still here, we're still fighting, and we're not going away. If you're reading this, if you're hearing my story, learn from it. Create safe words with your family. Verify before you send money. Ask questions that only the real person could answer. Be suspicious of urgency. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Protect yourself because no one else will. The banks won't protect you. The tech companies won't protect you. The law enforcement agencies can't protect you. Only you can protect you. But also, don't stop loving. Don't stop being willing to help. Don't let the criminals win by making you afraid to be human. Just be smart about it. Be prepared, have systems in place, because the world is full of people who will exploit your love, but it's also full of people who deserve your love. And you can't let the former poison the latter. That's the lesson I've learned from the worst experience of my life. Love is still worth the risk. Trust is still worth extending. Help is still worth giving. You just have to be smart about how you do it. You have to verify. You have to ask questions. You have to protect yourself while still remaining open to genuine connection and genuine need. It's a hard balance. I'm still learning how to walk that line, but I'm learning and I'm teaching others. And together, we're building a world where love doesn't have to mean vulnerability, where caring for someone doesn't make you a target, where the bonds between people are protected instead of exploited. It's slow work, it's hard work, but it's the only work that matters. My name used to be just another anonymous victim, but I chose to speak up. I chose to tell my story, and in doing so, I chose to transform my loss into something that might prevent others from experiencing the same loss. That doesn't give me back my $47,000. It doesn't restore my retirement or my sense of security, but it gives me purpose, and sometimes purpose is enough. Did you like the story? Please leave a comment and tell me where you listened from. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please hit that subscribe button now. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow for another emotional tale.